Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver had big shoes to fill when they were first released. Being a sequel to the phenomena that was Pokemon Red and Blue, there certainly were an abundance of expectations for Gold and Silver to not only match the popularity of their predecessors, but improve upon the core concepts that made Red and Blue a success. However, did they live up to the expectations put upon them, or did they fall short of the magic that was Pokemon Red and Blue? With today's video, I hope to give you all an objective answer to that question, and see just how well Gold and Silver stack up. Before you watch this review, I highly suggest you go and check out the video I made on Pokemon Red and Blue if you haven't already seen it, since I'll be referencing that video a lot throughout my critique. Without further ado, let's start by outlining my personal journey throughout the Johto region. I started off by picking Totodile as my starter in New Barktown, and naming him Xenu, based off the alien god in Scientology. After going to Cherry Grove and being sent to talk to Mr. Pokemon, I caught a Spinarak who I named Muffet. Next, I faced Faulkner's Gen, and it was a breeze. After this, I discovered that Team Rocket had returned, and swiftly defeated their forces in Azalea Town. Next, I moved on to defeat Bugsy with Muffet, who proved to be the superior bug type. After I navigated my way through the Ilex Forest and corralled a Farfetch'd, I made my way to Whitney in Goldenrod, and beat her after a few attempts. After that, I picked up my Eevee from Bill in Goldenrod and named him Whore! Then I faced off against Morty, who was a breeze, and Jasmine, who I beat in a close battle using Xenu. Chuck was up next, who gave me no problems. Following all those battles, I went into Team Rocket's hideout and easily made my way through. Continuing on my gym leader crusade, I defeated both Price and his Ice-type gym. After this, Team Rocket was back at it again in the radio tower, and I eventually took them down for the last time. Before I faced Claire, I had to grind a bit with a Swinub named Fredrickson that I picked up in the Ice Cave, but after a while, him and my Umbreon were enough to take her down. At long last, I was at the Elite Four, but before I was any sort of level to beat them, I had to do intensive training because I only used 4 Pokemon during this whole run. Alas, I was eventually able to face them, and here's the rundown. Will was decently easy with Whore by my side. Kogo was a bit tougher, but Xenu's raw strength ended up being the deciding factor for my victory. Bruno was a bit tough, but all my Pokemon combined had the edge over him. Karen was extremely easy since I had Ghost-type moves on 2 of my Pokemon. And lastly, Lance was not too difficult since Fredrickson was both super effective and super bulky, not to mention Xenu and Whore being over-leveled as shit. Finally, I entered the Hall of Fame, where the same music from the beginning plays, symbolizing the end of my journey. Now with that summary of the Gold and Silver experience out of the way, we can begin grading the game using this point system showing on screen. For the gameplay, I'm going to try and keep it concise, only pointing out what parts felt better, worse, or the same. The main mechanics basic to Pokemon are still here: catch, battle, explore, that whole rigmarole. However, the battle system has had many small but significant improvements, which I'll cover in a later section. Just know that this will gain it some points in the gameplay department when compared to its predecessor. The bag in this game still has limited space, which I get makes sense due to the limitations of the Game Boy, but it's still frustrating nonetheless. It disrupts gameplay when you need to get rid of junk in your bag. Honestly, that's most of what I have to say here. Not a lot of the core concept of Pokemon gameplay are changed too drastically. Random encounters are still random encounters, the game still feels slow overall, and it's still Pokemon. However, in areas they did change, they mostly just improved, so I give this section a solid 65 out of 100. Some things, such as Pokémon Selection, did feel worse in certain ways though, and certain underlying problems are still present, so I can't give this section too many points over what I gave it in Gen 1. Speaking of Pokémon Selection though, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves, because I have some very strong things to say about the Pokemon Selection in Gold and Silver, or rather, the lack thereof. Okay, let's just start off with the new Pokemon added, which are definitely hit or miss for me. The hits such as Scizor, Tyranitar, Houndoom, and Skarmory are really solid hits and fan favorites for a reason, but the misses are, well, Scantler, Ledian, Quillfish, and Dunsparce, which are often the butts of many jokes. Others would be considered misses if not for the evolutions that they would later receive in Gen 4, so if anything, those Pokemon don't really add or subtract to the Pokemon Selection to me. Lastly are the abomination brainchild of some sick fuck-it game freak known as baby Pokemon. Baby Pokemon are not just useless, but are actually a detriment to many Pokemon that would be otherwise solid. First off, these little shits have horrible stats and are added before previously fine Pokemon, who didn't have any evolutions or pre-evolutions. Second, the way they evolve is always through some ass-backwards form of evolution, such as friendship. Lastly, the reason for their existence is completely arbitrary. Most people cite world building as a defense for these mouth-breathing gremlins, because it only makes sense that every Pokemon has a smaller, more annoying, more useless version of itself before it becomes an adult. But the problem is that not every Pokemon has one of these, and none of them need one. Dunsparce comes out of the egg looking the same way as he does through his whole lifespan, and that's perfectly fine. Most animals in real life only really grow in size as they age, so why can't Pokemon like Jinx be that way too? Baby Pokemon are annoying and a joke of an addition. Even after that rant, I'm not done shit-talking this game's choice of Pokemon. To lead into my next point, I'm going to show you guys where certain Pokemon can be found in Gen 2 and see if you can spot my problem. Misdreavus, the only new ghost type, can only be found in Mount Silver's caves in the post-game. Heracross, Pineco, and Aimpom can only be found by headbutting trees, and Heracross is notoriously bad in this situation. Sneasel, one of the best dark types, can only be found on Mount Silver in the post-game. Murkrow and Houndour, two of the 4 dark types in the game, can only be found on Route 7, which is in fucking Kanto, aka post-game. Finally, Larvitar, one of the fan favorites from this generation, is only found on Mount Silver, which once again is post-game. Do you guys see now why I only came into the Elite Four with 4 Pokemon? It's because my options of actual Gen 2 Pokemon are so needlessly limited or out of the way to get. Instead, the region is filled with mostly Gen 1 Pokemon, which just adds on to the problem. When I play Gold and Silver, I want to be able to use the new Pokemon introduced in those games. So why are those new Pokemon locked in a region that they're not even native to? It makes no logical sense, and from a gameplay perspective, it's very frustrating to not be able to use many of the new Pokemon that are advertised to you on your journey to become the champion. Even the trainers barely use the new Pokemon. I mean, just look at all of these examples of needlessly overusing Gen 1 Pokemon. It's absurd how many Kanto Pokemon there are in Johto, and how many Gen 2 Pokemon are either out of the way to get, or locked until your main journey is already completed. For all the reasons listed above, this section gets a meager 25 out of 90, only gaining points for the solid additions of this game's Pokédex. The battle system has a few notable and important changes to it. For starters, special attack and defense are now split, which was a big problem in competitive play for Gen 1. Held items and weather effects, which are also staple parts of modern Pokemon, were added. These two things heavily improve upon strategy in Pokemon battles, and while the battle system is still far from perfect, they're both big steps in the right direction. A quick quality of life change is that TMs and HMs now tell you what they are in the menu, which, for some reason, wasn't the case before. On the topic of HMs, they added a new one, that being Waterfall. I've already discussed why HMs are a bad feature, so it should go without saying that adding more of those fuckers is a horrible decision. However, on a brighter note, HMs can now be activated without opening up the Pokemon menu like before, so that's a nice quality of life change. The friendship mechanic is introduced in this generation as a way to grow and evolve certain Pokemon, but in my opinion, this feature falls flat. It takes seemingly forever to evolve Pokemon that need friendship to do so, and on top of that, it's not easy to check their friendship progress. I would say that I prefer regular evolution, and wish friendship didn't exist, but that could just be me overreacting. Next up on the line of mainstay additions is Pokemon breeding. Once again, this feature is mostly going to be important for competitive due to its relation to statistics and later on abilities. It can help to give more dedicated players a stronger team in the long run, and is a rewarding activity to do in the post-game. Breeding is also a good way to hunt for shiny Pokemon, which is yet another big feature for the Pokemon fanbase. Though in reality, it doesn't really add anything useful besides another thing to collect in-game, and more reason to sink time into your save file. Finally, the biggest addition, the 2 new types, Dark and Steel. Well, I say that, but they're not really seen in the base game since Gen 2 didn't bother to add any new Pokemon of this type that were readily accessible besides Magnemite and Umbreon, I guess, which is a pain in the ass to evolve due to friendship. Anyways, this is honestly a big addition for competitive more than anything, and overall, I feel like they are useful new types for that aspect alone. In summary, most of the new additions just affect strategy and Pokemon battling, and overall, what they did in that department was a big plus. The new additions all expand upon mainline Pokemon in positive ways, and while some could have been executed better, the changes are definitely more good than bad. I give this section a 70 out of 80, holding 10 points for friendship, new HMs, and new features that aren't fully fleshed out yet, such as the new types. The story and adventure are relatively rehashed from Red and Blue. You meet a professor who gives you a Pokemon and a Pokedex and then sends you on an adventure where you beat all 8 gems, Team Rocket, and your rival, all while befriending Pokemon and people alike along the way. At least Team Rocket is a little more interesting here since it's a sequel of Red and Blue and they're trying to reform, but it's still just Team Rocket. I think that most of the new characters like Silver, Lance, and a few of the gem leaders such as Whitney and Claire are actually pretty interesting and definitely fan favorites. Red is also in this game, which is very interesting since we played as him in Gen 1, and most people agree that the confrontation with him is one of the best parts of this game. Basically, the story here is about on the same level as Red and Blue, but the characters introduced are a bit more interesting and less one-note, giving this game a score of 50 out of 70 in the story and characters department. Now let's talk about the region. There's a little bit more variety in Johto than in Kanto, with a more oriental feel to most of the towns, which really makes Johto stand out and feel less generic. There are also a few more unique locations such as the Ice Cave, Ruins of Alph, and Dragon's Den, which have no real parallel in Kanto. It's a little less structured and linear than Kanto's region, and for some this may be a plus because it gives your playthrough a larger feeling of adventure and exploration. However, this less structured approach works out better on paper than it does in practice. The problem with being able to face one gym before another is that the leveling pretty much requires that you defeat them in a certain order. For example, after fighting Jasmine's level 35 Pokemon with my level 30s, I went up against Chuck's level 30 Pokemon with my level 30s. But then, after that, I went over to Mahogany Town and started fighting level 17 Pokemon. The Pokemon I'm going up against should not be getting weaker as I progress. The point of making this region more open world should be to give each player a unique experience, but I just found myself being confused and feeling lost. To give players the freedom of choice, but have a correct way to go about things, is contradicting and frustrating for players who are playing through the game for the first time. Despite that, the region has enough unique and memorable locations to keep me from scoring this section too low. Oh yeah, also the Kanto region is in this game, but that's technically not a part of Gen 2's region, so I can't give it too many points because of it. For all those reasons, I'm gonna give the Johto region a solid 50 out of 60. By the end of these reviews, the music sections are all going to start to gel together, because the most consistent part out of all 25 years of Pokemon has been this franchise's music. The music in Gen 2 may not be as iconic as some of the tracks in Gen 1, but they are just as good. I played most of this game in class during my free time, so I didn't have the sound on most of the time. However, I know that the music is good, so I'm still going to give it high praise. The National Park theme is a particular standout. Anyways, to keep this short, the music is once again great, and I think everyone agrees, so I confidently give it a 45 out of 50. In this area, I usually go over stuff that didn't fit into other sections and are too small to put into their own. This includes the postgame, which I feel deserves to be talked about on its own for reasons that I'm not going to explain here. Now, I didn't play the postgame myself, but I asked my friend who was a big Pokemon fan what he thought about it, and here's roughly what he said. While the fact that they included a whole other region in the form of Kanto is impressive, there isn't much going on there besides a few events and the gyms. The gyms also aren't that interesting, since all of them are at the Elite Fours level, making the battles uninteresting after a while. One more thing is that many Pokemon are locked until the postgame, which, as I've discussed, is a bad thing. Overall, it's cool to see how things have changed in Kanto since Red and Blue, but other than that, the experience is kind of underwhelming. Another thing that's very noticeable about Gen 2 is the graphics. Color is a big addition, and it helps to make the world feel more vibrant and alive. However, it's not perfect, as some tiles are colored strangely for whatever reason, and certain Pokemon have the wrong color palette for zero good reason. Speaking of Pokemon sprites, they actually fixed a few of the ones from Gen 1 that were fucked up, so that's nice. Alright, so I feel like I have to mention the insane technical feats that were done in order for this game to be released. I don't want to go into too much detail because that's not the point of the video, but just know that the developers pushed the Game Boy Color to its limits when creating this game and fitting everything in. It's quite endearing how much they got done, so they're definitely getting some brownie points for it. Lastly, I want to bring up Pokemon Crystal, which honestly has barely any notable new features. You can play as a girl in this one, and the first ever Battle Tower appears in this version, which are both neat and now staples of the franchise. However, Pokemon Crystal also makes some Pokemon that were attainable in Gold and Silver unobtainable here for no reason. I mean, come on, Mareep and Flaffy are now unable to be caught. What did they ever do to you to deserve this fate, Game Freak? Whatever, I don't have much more to say here, so I'm giving this a 40 out of 50. With that, I've pretty much said everything I wanted to say, so let's see how this game stacks up as a whole. Tallying all the points up gives Pokemon Gold and Silver a 345 out of 500, or a 69% if we were grading this like a test. Overall, this isn't a terrible score, and because it improves upon most of the aspects of Pokemon Red and Blue in small ways, it gets a better score than those games. However, many problems that are present in Red and Blue still remain unchanged. Some problems, such as HMs, actually manage to become worse, and there are even problems that are completely new. Things like Friendship Evolution, the atrocious Pokémon Selection, and fucking baby Pokemon are all issues that weren't present in Gen 1. Besides those things, the battling system in this game had some major improvements and additions. Sure, it's still not perfect, but the fact that this game introduces so many key concepts to competitive Pokemon really helps give Gold and Silver that edge over Pokemon Red and Blue. I think that along with competitive battling, the post-game adds longevity to Gen 2, and it's definitely good, even to today's standards. Though I personally think that this game doesn't have a lot of replayability to it, and that the main story doesn't have enough going for it that would make me want to start another save file instead of keeping the old one. There's still a lot to improve on, and although some new features are annoying, Gen 2 is mostly a step forward for the Pokemon franchise. With that, the only thing left to do is see how it holds up against later installments. Tune in next time to see whether Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald continue this incline in quality for the mainline Pokemon series. Until then, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, donate to my Patreon, give me your organs so I can sell them on the black market, and follow me on social media.